There we go. So I think we're going. Good morning again, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
So today I'm going to talk about reactivity and responsiveness, or reaction and response, which we can get caught in semantics, and these words can mean many different things, but I'm using them to distinguish between two different behaviors, if you will. And I'm going to, so what I mean by those, and I'll get into them in more detail. Reaction is when something happens outside and we feel jarred, our ego is hit. And so it's a response, it's a behavior that comes out of our ego. A reaction is to be reactive. And we all know what somebody who's reactive is a label means. A response, by that I mean something that comes from deeper, something that is more natural, if you will, something that bypasses the ego, something that comes from the unconscious, from our intuition, something where there's a situation and there's just a natural response to it. We live in a world which by intention drives reactivity. I think most obviously of social media. The whole time cycle of how long it takes for people to get back on social media. A post happens and there's immediately some more stuff happening. It's all reactive. There's no pause, there's no reflection. It's just straight out of headspace. Anger radio, as I've heard it called, the talk show radio stuff where people they're intentionally poking, potentially polarizing, and that intentional polarization is all about creating very strong reactions. So we live in a society, and the whole marketing thing around, I want this, I want more of that, the whole consumer culture is also reactive in nature. So none of this is going to be binary, and we can pick and quibble about the particular lenses I put on this, but there's a direction that I think comes through this that is the more important thing of what I'm trying to communicate. So those reactions, they tend to come out of a headspace. They tend to come out of thinking, because they come out of our constructed egos. They come out of these identities. How dare they do that? That's against what I believe in. That's against what's right. So there's a lot of ideas up here. We've talked before, excuse me, I'm sorry. Talked before about chitta and shin, which are a Sanskrit word and a Chinese word for heart-mind. I talked about the artificial distinction that we make, or the distinction we make to separate mind from heart. But in a lot of cultures and in a lot of the source texts of the Buddhism that we study, they're not separate. We've got one word. So the Xing Xing Ming, for example, is a Chinese poem. It's translated as, usually, heart-mind, faith in heart-mind. And the translator has a choice whether to use heart or mind when they come across Xing, Ditta, Chitta. So we are getting the editorial commentary essentially of the translator when we see the translation. And it's a cultural commentary as well, because the words don't translate. The words don't translate. So it's easy to land on, from what I've just said about reactivity versus response. Let's make the journey from the head to the heart. And I've often talked about the journey from the head to the heart being the longest journey you will ever take. But I've been thinking about that a lot, and I don't think that's the right way of looking at it. It's a useful way of looking at it, and as a starting point, it's kind of a skillful starting point. But I think the principle is a deeper principle. The problem we have, so there are a couple of layers of problem. The first layer of problem we have is not that the head is bad and the heart is good, but the head is words and questions. The head doesn't have a value system. The heart has a value system. It's called love. So by putting the head in charge, we create a problem. It's really useful, but it shouldn't be making those value judgments. It should be deferring to the passive, the receptive heart energy to make those value judgments. So we've just simply got them the wrong way around, and we're trained to have them the wrong way around. That's what our society does. So, and it becomes worse because head energy is strong, aggressive energy. Heart energy is passive, receptive energy. So if the head's in charge, the heart isn't going to assert itself and say, "Get out of the way." It's kind of difficult to adjust it. We can adjust it, but we need to recognize what we're doing and do it intentionally. So that's layer one, is head versus heart. And then up here we have Manjushri, who is head, he's wisdom, the sword cutting through illusion. The sword, by the way, is two-edged. One sword cuts through illusion. The other side of the sword causes pain. It does. And in a lot of systems, that the air energy, the head energy, what that represents, is wisdom, is knowledge, but it is also suffering. It is also sorrow. Because those two kind of go together. And we've got Avalokiteshvara or Guanyin or Chenjerig, who is the bodhisattva of compassion on the other side, the heart energy. But there are actually four main bodhisattvas. There's a lot of bodhisattvas. Arguably, you're the bodhisattvas, right? Mm-hmm. But there are four main bodhisattvas. Manjushri is the bodhisattva of mind. Avalokiteshvara is the bodhisattva of the heart. If you read the Lotus Sutra, the last chapter of the Lotus Sutra is about Samantabhadra. A large chunk of the Avatamsaka Sutra was about Samantabhadra. And in the Lotus Sutra, there's the threefold Lotus Sutra. There's the main body, and then there's a sutra at the beginning and a sutra at the end. The sutra at the end is all about Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra is the bodhisattva of activity, which is fire, if you like. That's air, that's water, and activity is fire. I'll come back to those if you think I'm getting too spacey and too.
This is great.
But this is not departing from Buddhist teaching using the elements. So Samantabhadra is activity, which is fire. There's another one which is Kshitigarbha, or in Japanese, Jizo. In Japanese, you see statues of Jizo by the roadside. They're for people who die in road accidents. Also it's the bodhisattva for stillborn children and children who die young. More broadly, Kshitigarbha is earthwomb or earth store. That's what that means. It's the bodhisattva of the earth. Jokes later. It's the bodhisattva of the earth. So it's not just heart and head. It's these which have certain energies. It's the body and our activities as well that are really important to tune into. In the where is this? This is the Sandakai. In the Sandakai, four elements must return to their nature as a child to its mother. Fire is hot, water is wet, earth hard, I've missed one. Anyway, you get the point. It's a line that I can't remember right now because I'm on stage. Right? But the four elements, and then it goes on to talk about the senses. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha also talks about the elements, the four elements. So the four elements are actually, they're used a lot in the Mahayana teachings, and they are used in the Pali teachings. The four elements recognize different aspects, different energies of our being. Air energy is open, it's the mind. And so air energy is open, it's the mind. Water energy is fluid, it moves, but it's receptive, and that's the heart. Fire energy is activity, it's even life force. And the fire energy is that which, when the translation of the Nibbana is putting out the fire, but it's not actually extinguishing it, it's releasing the fire. And it's about releasing this fire energy. That's what that's about. It's about releasing that energy. So it's no longer bound to the fuel. It's no longer burning. It's no longer clinging. It's released. But it's about fire. And what's the one I've missed out?
Earth.
Earth. Earth is about solidity. Earth is something much more concrete, something much more solid. So, and there are 5 Buddha families. If you go into Tibet, there are 5 Buddha families. 4 of the Buddha families align with these same 4 elements, which have these same attributes. The 5th Buddha family aligns with what is often translated as space. In Sanskrit, the word is akasha, the word of akashic fields. It's translated as space, but if you go back to the Lotus Sutra, you've got a chapter in there where all the bodhisattvas of this earth, they come out from the space that is underground. But it translates as space, but akasha, again, it's a thing that doesn't translate properly, so we get stuck. Time and space are things we fabricate. We fabricate space to put stuff in. It's something we make up. We fabricate time to put events in. We need containers to have reference to our events and our stuff. And these are the things we fabricate as containers, as frames of reference for them. Akasha also means emptiness. So, Vairocana Buddha, who is the Buddha of that 5th element, also ether sometimes in the English we talk, the 5th element of the ether, but it's the bodhisattva of emptiness. It's the bodhisattva of awakening, right? Emptiness is not a thing either. I mean, it's a word. It's another difficult word. So the journey that we're talking about here isn't a journey from the head to the heart. It's actually an adjustment and a recalibration of these energies. It's recognizing how important this thinking mind is and how valuable it can be. But it's not valuable in its own value system. It's valuable when it's in a more meaningful value system. The value system of the heart, the value system of love. So this is about tuning in as we sit and as we walk around in the world. Tune into our heart. So that when something happens over here, we don't say, oh my goodness, that person is causing so much suffering, we need to stop that. We look at this and say, oh my goodness. And your hand does go here. Oh my goodness. That is awful, that's so sad, there is so much suffering. And that person who's behaving in that way, just think of what that life must have been like to lead up to that behavior. It's an opening into compassion of the whole thing. So it's moving our energy into that heart energy. Use it, we can then use the mind subordinated to that energy to think about what we would do and what an appropriate response is. That's probably what I should have called this talk an appropriate response. An appropriate response. It's about tuning into body energy. When you sit and you tune into your body, you can feel, so intuition isn't up here, intuition is in here. We call it gut instinct for a reason. We don't call it strange part of the brain that none of us really know, instinct, we call it gut instinct. And if you tune into your body, you can feel some of these responses happening deep within the body. So it's tuning into the body and allowing ourselves to open up to the deep wisdom that's in our body. At one level, one of the practical offshoots of this is the basis for lie detectors. The body doesn't lie. It cannot lie. And there are people who just are naturally tuned into this who can spot that. And we all can to some degree. I think all of us can to a lot degree. But we have been trained not to use those instincts. When it's like, you're lying, I know you're lying. And you know because of this. You know because the other person's body cannot lie. And if your body awareness is subtle enough, you can see that. This is a practical side of it. But our bodies have this intuition, and if we can tune into that intuition and allow our responses to come out of that intuition and our responses to come out of the heart, the compassion of the heart, rather than reactions out of this headspace, it's a much more stable, much more peaceful way of being. And the fourth energy is that fire energy, and you can feel this when you breathe. When you're breathing, you concentrate on the breath, you pay attention to the breath. But once you settle in on the breath, you can feel it's not just air going in and out of the lungs. People tell you breathe out of the abdomen. And just intellectually, that sounds ridiculous. But then if you settle into your meditation, you get stable, you feel it's real. And then you start to know. In the body, you know this is real, and there's something going on here. And of course it's not nitrogen and carbon dioxide and oxygen. It's energetic. Many of you have done different forms of yoga and you've got some experience of Kundalini. That's energy, that's this fire energy moving around in the body. And we can learn to control and manage the flow of this energy within the body, and recognize that the energy we're controlling and the body we're controlling within isn't this shape and this size. If you look at the chakra system, there's like chakras beneath your feet and chakras above your head. I mean, it's not what we think it is. It's a different shape, a different size. The edges aren't where we think they are. And you can tune into this, which also, I mean, that's the life energy, and it's also recognizing the artificiality of the boundaries we put around ourselves. So Buddha was a master of pranayama, which is the breath yoga, and that is not air. That is all of this stuff. If you go into a lot of the Indian texts around the yoga, you'll find a lot about this. If you go up to Tibet and you look at Tibetan Buddhist texts, there's a whole system in Tibet of the channels and the winds, and I think the other word is bindi. I think it's bindi. It's the little bullet things, little dots that are what are blown around through the channels by the wind. It's a whole energy system. It's a description, very sophisticated system describing this subtle body and the energy flows we create, which is, as I said, it's this fire energy. So this is, to think of it as a journey from the head to the heart is not right. It can be useful to start with thinking about that because it's getting us out of being stuck in our head. But once you start recognizing, you start getting out of the head, then we can move into seeing this is actually a journey through the heart. It's through the heart, into and through the heart, into and through the body, into and through this life energy. Ultimately, it's into this emptiness, into this just what transcends even this. But in the first place, then, as a practical, everyday matter, something that we can all learn to do, we can all practice doing, is recognizing the richness of this thing we walk around in, that we think of as a me. And we tend to get stuck in this bit of the me, and really start to recognize and acknowledge the other parts of the me, and start to rely on them more. Let the body do some thinking for us. Let the heart do some thinking for us. Slow down to let this happen. And find that what shows up in the world is a response. It is a natural response. It is a compassionate response. It is a response from deep wisdom, not from intellectual wisdom, but from deep wisdom. And it is one that is more peaceful. It causes less suffering here, and it causes less suffering there. So this is an encouragement as we settle into a meditation to explore these other parts of me, to open these other parts of me up, and to start putting a little bit of trust in those. And then we find we can trust them a little bit, put a little bit more trust in them, and keep going.